Hello everyone, welcome to our latest edition of the Cleveland Sports Show. I am your host, Darius Sethna. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your week to sit down or stand up or whatever you're doing and listen to the Cleveland Sports Show with yours truly. So happy to have Logan Purcell. He'll be joining me in a few minutes here. We're going to talk about the Premier League. The Cavs March Madness is finally here. It's been 2 years and it is certainly been worth the wait so far. We'll also talk about what the Browns have been doing in free agency, some other NFL free agency updates, and we'll also be talking about the Cleveland Indians and what they've been doing in spring training thus far. Ladies and gentlemen, here is our latest episode of the Cleveland Sports Show. It's all starting right now. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Darius Sethna of NordoniaHills.news, and the Cleveland Sports Show starts right now. Hello everyone, welcome to our latest edition of the Cleveland Sports Show. I am your host, Darius Sethna. As I mentioned, we'll have Logan Purcell joining us in a little bit here. But first and foremost, it's time to get you started off with your sports fact of the day. Today is March 20th. 2020, and on this day we have an interesting sports fact for you. On this day, all the way back in 1914, first international figure skating tournament held in New Haven, Connecticut, in the United States, obviously. But a little more information on that first U.S. figure skating championship. Norman Mackey Scott, who was a Canadian, would take home the top prize for the men's figure skating competition. He would then go on to win the same title in Canada's own figure skating championships later that year. The female championship would go to Teresa Weld, who was of Massachusetts. She would go on to become a 3-time Olympic skater, and together with her partner Nathaniel Niles, she founded and edited the skating magazine for 40 years. All this information is thanks to Today in Connecticut History, Office of the State Historian. So very special thanks to them for this awesome information. Today, March 20th, 2021. Sorry about that. I said it was 2020. But on this day, March 20th, 1914, first international figure skating tournament held in New Haven, Connecticut. That was something a little, we don't really talk about figure skating here on the Cleveland Sports Show, so that's why I love the sports fact of the day. We always have, usually, an interesting, out-of-this-world kind of sport that we don't usually cover in the show. But let's get you started off with some Premier League action. Now, overall standings in the Premier League, the soccer league taking place in England right now, it's competitive as ever if you take away the gap between the first seed and the second seed, because Manchester City is going to run away with the Premier League. We obviously know that. They are 14 points ahead of their in-city rival, Manchester United. Manchester City with 71 points so far on the season, with 30 matches played, 22 wins, 5 draws, 3 losses. Manchester United come in with 57 points. They have 16 wins, 9 draws, 4 losses. Leicester City comes in at third place in the Premier League. They have 17 wins, 5 draws, and 7 losses. And they have 56 points for Leicester City. Chelsea, with the 4 seed in the Premier League, they have 29 matches under their belt so far, 14 wins, 9 draws, 6 losses for them, for a combined total of 51 points. Now, in 5th place, we have West Ham with 28 matches played so far, with 14 wins, 6 draws, 8 losses, for a combined total of 48 points. Then in 6th place, to round out our top 6 in the Premier League this week, we have Liverpool. They have 13 wins, 7 draws, and 9 losses for 46 total points. Stats in the Premier League, updated stats right now. Mohamed Salah of Liverpool, still the leading goal scorer with 17 goals. Bruno Fernandes and Harry Kane come in for second place, each of those players with 16 goals on the season. Dominic Calvert-Lewin and Patrick Bamford then come in at third place, each of those players with 14 goals. Harry Kane still leads the league in assists, and now he's 2 assists ahead of Kevin De Bruyne. Harry Kane of Tottenham Hotspur with 13 assists on the season so far. Kevin De Bruyne of Manchester City, 11 assists, coming in at second place. Bruno Fernandes and Jack Grealish come in at third place. They are both tied with 10 assists. Upcoming matches for you in the Premier League. We have only one match today. It'll be Brighton going up against Newcastle. That'll be at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. We also have 2 matches tomorrow on Sunday. Get your popcorn ready at 3:30 p.m. because Aston Villa will be taking on Tottenham Hotspur, and then West Ham will be going up against Arsenal. The game between West Ham and Arsenal will actually start earlier. That game will be at 11 a.m. The game between Aston Villa and Tottenham will be at 3:30 p.m. tomorrow. Other matches, the next week, we'll actually have a couple weeks off in the Premier League. We won't have matches after this weekend until Saturday, April 3rd. So all the players and teams in the Premier League will be getting a nice chunk of time off, and we'll have more Premier League action to discuss in a couple weeks as these players will be getting rest. But we'll keep you updated with the standings and what is going on in the Premier League. It's time to move from England back to the United States. We're going to talk about the Cleveland Cavaliers. Going to talk some NBA basketball. And now I have Mr. Logan Purcell joining me. And here he is once again, ladies and gentlemen. Another week, another episode for Logan Purcell. Logan, thanks so much for taking some time out of your day to join us. Looking forward to talking with you today.
Yeah, thank you. Me too.
Yeah, I am really excited, Logan, because we're going to be talking about some March Madness in a couple minutes here. But first, let's stick to the NBA, and first and foremost, the Cleveland Cavs, who had their most recent game yesterday against the visiting San Antonio Spurs. Home game for the Cavs, but they fall short to San Antonio. Final score of that one, 116-100. It's been a rough patch for the Cavs since the All-Star break. They only have one win since their return from the All-Star break, and it was this past Wednesday against a shorthanded Boston Celtics team that did not have Kemba Walker. This past Wednesday, the luck of the Irish was not on the Celtics side, surprisingly. It was actually on the Cavs side. The Cavs defeat the Celtics 117-110. Earlier this week as well, unfortunately, were additional losses for the Cavs. They lost to the Heat by 15 in Miami this past Tuesday and by 18 to the Atlanta Hawks in Georgia on Sunday, March 14th. So, Logan, I want to get it started with you. So I just mentioned all the games that happened for the Cavs this week. Which game, I know most likely will be the game that they won, but which game stood out to you for the Cavs for better or maybe even for worse this week?
Well, I mean, I'm going to start exactly where you mentioned it with the performance on Wednesday night against the Celtics.
Yeah.
To me, this stood out in a positive and a negative manner. I like to bring out both in each so it doesn't look like I'm solely looking at how bad the Cavs are or their upsides, right? So I think on the upside, they had a very, very electrifying run in the first half. With about 5 minutes to go, they were up 40-32. They went into halftime almost up 20.
Right, yeah.
They went on an absolutely amazing run, which is exactly what they kind of have to do. You know, all the great teams, basketball is a game of runs. And the teams that have the best runs win the game. So I think on that personal aspect, to end the first half,
right.
That was a really, really impressive way to finish it out. But at the end of the game, though, I noticed they kind of struggled a bit. You know, like I said, they were up by almost 20 at halftime, and they won by 7.
Yeah, the Celtics outscored the Cavs 36-27 in that third quarter, which has been the Achilles heel for the Cavs all season long, Logan.
Yeah, it seems like the Achilles heel of the Cavs has been the entire second half.
Yeah.
Apparently. But I also did, before we moved on to the next game, touch on Colin Sexton.
Yes.
he had 29 points on 50% from the field, 2 of 5 from three-point land, but he had he had a very well-rounded performance. I'd like to mention the fact that he had 7 rebounds to tag along with his 29 points as well as 6 assists.
Yeah.
I think that kind of well-rounded play from a star guard in Cleveland is exactly the kind of player that they're going to continue to need as we see him develop into a better player. Yeah,
Sexton's played well this week. Logan, I would actually probably give the player of the week for the Cavs this particular week to Darius Garland. Especially in that game against the Celtics, I just saw Darius Garland getting anywhere he wanted on the floor. It was probably also a combination of the bad Celtics defense. But even in that game against the Celtics, Logan, Darius Garland, 25 points, played the most minutes of any Cav in that game against the Celtics, 38 total minutes. And here's another stat, Logan. I know that we've both not been the biggest fans of Isaac Okoro, but he did have 15 points last night against 15 points in the win against the Celtics. And then on yesterday, he only had 4 points. So again, there's that inconsistency aspect. Logan, let's talk about this game against the Spurs, because this seemed like a game that was starting to really get out of hand for the Cavs in that third quarter. But last night in that fourth quarter, they started applying some full court pressure at the end of the game. They outscored San Antonio 44-35 in the fourth. So the Cavs scored 44 points alone in the fourth quarter, but it was still just not enough. Logan, what did you think about this Cavs game? Because at the end of the day, if you watched the end of that game, you can't complain about the effort aspect, but then the fact that they were also down by 22, 21 points in that third quarter. So what's your take on the Cavs' overall performance last night against the Spurs?
Well, as a team, from anywhere that isn't a guard position, I think the effort was there. It wasn't, to the next level like it was against Boston per se, but they had good enough effort to win the game. I just don't think they could string together the correct runs that they needed. But I would like to mention the fact that a guard, I believe he's 6'5", Kelvin Johnson.
Yeah, he had an amazing game.
How many people have heard of him? He's a Kentucky alum. I believe it was 21 rebounds.
Yeah, 23 points, 21 rebounds.
21 rebounds.
Yeah.
I mean, unless Andre Drummond starts suiting up for the Spurs, what is going on?
He's only 6'5", too, Kelvin Johnson. It's not like he's 6'10" or something like that.
I just don't get it. And I've talked about this on previous weeks, and I will be the first one to tell you. Same thing with defenses. There is such thing as being an elite defender. There's no such thing as being a bad defender because it's effort.
Right.
You have effort, and you make an attempt. You're a decent defender.
Yeah.
I like James Harden back in Houston. Sometimes years with LeBron, it's not that they aren't good defenders, it's they don't want to play defense.
Yeah.
So, to me, rebounding is almost the exact same way, unless you're playing some 7'3" Boban Marjanovic, but they didn't. They played a 6'5" Kelvin Johnson.
Yeah.
Who absolutely dominated the glass.
Yeah, Jared Allen, only 11 rebounds last night, and that was really an aspect that surprised me, Logan. Just Jared Allen, it just hasn't seemed like he's had that pep in his step this week. So hopefully he can get back on track next week. Logan, let's talk about the losses the Cavs had earlier this week against the Hawks and the Heat. This was, especially that game against the Miami Heat, I was a little bit disappointed with just the overall fact that the Cavs, they had a good start to the game, but then it's just like as the game wore down, you could definitely see that Miami had the superior team. I didn't walk into that game expecting the Cavs were going to win, but I certainly expected more. I think I expected more effort from the Cavs overall in this game against Miami. Your thoughts on this Heat game, Logan?
Oh, I think that, basically, you talk about the decent start for the Cavs, but they were still down 11 at the end of the first quarter.
Yeah.
So it was pretty stagnant the entire game, honestly. I did get a chance to watch a little bit of the game, and they just seemed kind of like they didn't want to play. Like they just didn't have much. They almost knew they had no chance to win. Garland, who has had a fantastic week. We failed to mention the fact that he did score 29 points last night.
Yeah.
29.
Yeah, he and Sexton combined they combined for like 58.
Fantastic performance.
Yeah.
But he struggled. He struggled pretty heavily. Only scoring 11 in 33 minutes. But you look across the board, there weren't many, performances from an individual standpoint that stood out to me. There were a couple that were rough, but nothing that really impressed me.
Yeah.
So, again, there's unfortunately not a lot to say because they just didn't seem like they wanted to play.
And you look at that. Let's look at this Hawks game too, real quick here, Logan, as well. No one on the Cavs was efficient in the scoring column. Colin Sexton was the leading scorer for the Cavs in that loss against the Hawks, which is 15 points in 28 minutes. Just clearly, obviously, not going to get it done. And the Hawks outscored the Cavs. This was a competitive game, until the fourth quarter, Logan. And we said this second half really is the Achilles heel. More particularly in this game against Atlanta, it was that fourth quarter that really doomed the Cavs. They got outscored by Atlanta 31-16. I want to ask you this, Logan. When you see the Cavs, giving up these huge runs to multiple opponents, what are the biggest factors of why they give up those big runs? What do you see when you watch these games of why the Cavaliers, always get outscored by so many points in a specific quarter? What do you see?
Well, when you think of runs, some teams are different, right? When you think of teams that are, that are smaller, typically the issue is they just want to run.
Right.
They don't really have the opportunity to set up the offense. You think of the Nets, but they have the different, and I think of the Cavs similarly too, because in the starting lineup, typically the Cavs don't play anybody above 7 foot,
right,
above 6'10", minus Jared Allen.
Right.
Larry Nance is, I believe, 6'8".
Yeah.
And besides that, everybody else is shorter, which in the NBA nowadays is a pretty small team. You think of all the other NBA teams. There's a lot of guys that are 6'10", 6'11", that are snipers.
Right.
Kevin Durant, Jason Tatum, Kawhi Leonard, you name it. There's a bunch of guys, right?
Right.
But because of that, I consider the Cavs a smaller team, and if you watch the games, you can kind of notice that when they get into a couple fast break points, they'll start trying to run the pace. They'll try to pick it up. Yeah. Right? But when the shots don't drop, nobody's back. So they don't ever try to set up the offense, and the team's rushed. Right. Which is typically why the Cavaliers struggle so heavily in turnovers. They need to figure out a way to slow it down at times and just try to run the offense, because they are not doing any of that in losses. They just want to run the pace.
And let's talk about, Logan, the upcoming schedule for the Cavs. So tomorrow they'll be right back at it at Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse. They have 2 more games here in Cleveland before they embark on a grueling 5-game West Coast road trip. One of those games is actually going to be in Chicago, so not West Coast, but the three of those games will be against Western Conference teams. So tomorrow at 7 p.m., Raptors taking on the Cavs. It's Monday, March 22nd at 7:30 p.m. from Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse. Sacramento Kings, who just got a big win against the Celtics last night, will be in Cleveland taking on the Cavs. And then the Cavs embark on that 4-game road trip. They'll be going up against the Chicago Bulls on Wednesday from the United Center. They'll then head all the way to the West Coast, to Los Angeles, next Friday, March 26th, for a matchup with LeBron James and the Los Angeles Lakers. Cavs will then head north to Sacramento, Northern California, going up against the Kings. And then they will then head to Utah in Salt Lake City for a matchup with the Jazz before returning home on April 1st against Philadelphia. So, Logan, this is going to be a rough 4-game schedule for the Cavs because, I know the Chicago Bulls haven't been relevant in a while, but, this is a team that certainly competes. They're 18-22, Logan. They have lost their last 2 games, but they're record at home, they're 9-14. They're actually a worse home team than they are on the road. They actually have a winning record on the road, 9-14 though at home. What do you want to see from these Cavs, as they close out these home games and then head out to Chicago and then the West Coast for these pretty grueling matchups?
Well, one of the things that I've really been looking forward to seeing out of the Cavs for the next couple of weeks at least, and, not even just the games that you've talked about, but, from the rest of the season on, we started seeing a little bit of glimpses of Darius Garland picking up his game a little bit. 20-plus in the past couple games and more than 6 assists in both games. And I talked about Darius Garland being a possible corner piece alongside Colin Sexton, but one of the things that I said he needed to do was to figure out how to be a playmaker, a facilitator on that offense. Past couple games, he's done that. I really need to start seeing some consistency out of him before we start dubbing him as the next cornerstone alongside Colin Sexton as one of the younger guard tandems in the NBA. I think we definitely need to see, like I said, consistency out of Sexton, who has also picked up his game where he left off a couple months ago, and we were talking about him maybe being an A-minus player. Yeah. And then he dropped off a little bit. Yeah. So I think we're finally seeing an upward hill motion. Same with Jared Allen, who struggled this past week, but I think he's doing fine. I just think he hit, maybe just a little bit of a slump.
Yeah, that happens.
But, for me, it's just individual performances. This is clearly not a playoff team.
No.
So at this point, I can't really say that I'm looking for anything as a team. It's more individually because, to me, you've got 3 guys that are guaranteed cornerstones. Yeah. That's Allen, that's Sexton, that's Garland. So besides that, people got to work for their spots and make moves.
Yeah, overall standings for, you mentioned those standings, Logan. Overall standings for the Cleveland Cavaliers. They have a record of 15 wins, 26 losses. They're 10-11 at home, only 5-15 though on the road. They'll have a chance to improve that record with this 4-game road trip coming up. But they're 5-5 in their last 10 games, lost their most recent game. They're 13th place out of 15 in the Eastern Conference. So yeah, Logan, definitely doesn't look like Cavs will be in the playoff race this year. Overall standings in the NBA, 76ers still in first place, even after a tough loss against the Milwaukee Bucks this past week in overtime. Nets, although they lost to the Magic last night, they're still in second place in the Eastern Conference at 28-14. The Milwaukee Bucks come in at third place, 26-14. And how about this, Logan? Miami Heat, they really struggled to start this season. They're already fourth place in the Eastern Conference. They're back to a quality standing. They're 22-20, and they're the 4th seed in the Eastern Conference. And how about this? The Hawks and the Hornets, Logan, respectively take 5th and 6th place in the East. If the playoffs were to start today, the Bucks and the Hornets would face off in a first-round matchup, and the Heat and the Hawks would be in another first-round matchup. What do you say? Are you surprised that teams like the Heat, the Hawks, Hornets, and Knicks are in the playoff contention? I know, and especially with the Heat, because they had a really rough start to this season, and here they are in 4th place in the East. So, how do you feel about these Eastern Conference teams making their presence felt?
Well, I was really hoping you were going to touch on the Heat as well as the Knicks. I'll start with the Heat though. Everybody talked about the Heat and how they were struggling, and I was talking about maybe the Heat finals last year was a fluke, but I did fail to consider the fact that Jimmy Butler was not Jimmy Butler for the first 2 weeks. He didn't play a lot. I mean, he missed, I believe, the first week and a half, 2 weeks of the season, which doesn't sound like a lot, but that's 10 to 15 games based on your schedule.
Right.
So to me, that was a huge factor. And then you get in, it's a big rhythm change. It's just different. I think that this is the true Heat that we are seeing now. This is the team that will be going into the playoffs. So I think that was just a matter of getting them started. Jimmy Butler is playing the past 4 or 5 weeks at an MVP level. I believe he's averaging over 25 points a game, 8 rebounds, and 9 assists. He is playing on another level the past few weeks, and that's not over the season. That's the past 3 or 4 weeks. And then the Knicks. The Knicks are a very interesting story in the Eastern Conference this year. You've seen absolutely fantastic seasons from the likes of Julius Randle and R.J. Barrett, who is having right now, he's probably my pick for most improved. I mean, he has had a tremendous season. Leading them to a 21-21 record. I don't know how much more you could ask for, averaging 17.5 points a game. I mean, I understand that's what he kind of similar to what he did last year, but not really.
Right.
He was not RJ Barrett that we're seeing now. And, at this point, we're kind of, looking at him kind of like he plays like Blake Griffin back when he played for the Clippers. A nice 18 kind of per game kind of night kind of guy. But,
yeah.
I mean, he'll give you 30 every other night kind of thing. I mean, he is playing really, really well. But, I mean, the defense of this team is just suffocating.
And that's all thanks to Tom Thibodeau,
Yeah, they are just absolutely ridiculous. I mean, they're sixth in rebounding in the NBA, too. Effort. This team is hungry, and they want to win, and I got to give them credit where it's due.
Yeah, and
they're only a 7 seed, but they have played like top 5 seed in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see if the Knicks can strive to make that playoff push, and we can have playoff basketball back in New York City. Man, that would be awesome. Let's look at the Western Conference here, Logan. So the Lakers have won their last 4 games, and they're back to second place in the West. Utah Jazz still with that first seed in the Western Conference, but Phoenix is still, they're very formidable. They're 27-13. Clippers 26-16. They've kind of been shaky in their last 10 games. Only 4-6 in their last 10 games are the Clippers. Nuggets at 25-16. They've been playing well. They've won their last 3 games. Logan, let's look overall at the Western Conference standings. So this week, what has stood out to you the most? Obviously the Lakers, it looks like, they're getting back to their winning ways even without Anthony Davis. Clippers really have struggled. Trailblazers are in 6th place, 25-16. So 25-16 record in 6th place in the West. It's certainly a stacked conference. And the Spurs are the 7th seed, Logan, 22-16. So as of right now, and based on kind of what you've been seeing this week, what's your biggest takeaway from the Western Conference?
Well, I've got 2 of them. I'll start with the Portland Trailblazers at a 6th seed with a record of 25-16, as you mentioned.
Yep.
I just want to say this right now. Damian Lillard is maybe the best offensive show in the NBA right now alongside Kyrie Irving.
Yeah, I mean, I would have to put it between him and Kyrie.
Monster.
Yeah.
I mean, for anybody that follows any sports accounts on Instagram or anything like that, I mean, I got to school yesterday or something like that, and I scrolling through and I see Damian Lillard put up 50 on the Pelicans.
Mm-hmm.
What an absolute show!
And they needed all those 50
to watch
points.
This guy play basketball. He is just on another level. And to me, and I know I've not been popular, I haven't been one to say this often, but anybody that has a guy who can put up 50 has got a chance.
Yeah.
That's just how it is. And I have been absolutely on another level impressed with the likes of Damian Lillard.
Yeah.
And that Portland team is real. If Yusuf Nurkic can stay healthy and CJ McCollum can stop his playoff run of playing like crap in the playoffs, I mean, this team has got a chance to make some moves in the Western Conference and make a couple upsets.
Yeah, and, speaking, I was going to say about those 50 points, I'll let you go on here real quick, Logan, but I just wanted to point out, like, the Blazers only won that game by a single point. So, and, what really concerns me a little bit, Logan, about that is Damian Lillard had to score 50, and they only won by a point against the New Orleans Pelicans, no less. And, New Orleans is definitely an up-and-coming team, but still, that is something that concerns me a little bit. But I'll let you continue on what you were talking about.
Yeah, and then that second note of a player that I'd really like to mention who hasn't, for the level of basketball that he's been playing recently, or even as a whole and during the season, hasn't been getting a lot of publicity, is a guy by the name of Luka Doncic.
Yeah, he's been playing well.
His struggles to win basketball games has really, really taken a toll on his legacy. And I know he's, only 23, 24 years old, however old he is. But, I mean, this guy is one of the most mature young basketball players that I have ever seen or heard of in my life. Because, I mean, you talk about a guy who is averaging 29 points a game to tag along with his 8.4 rebounds and 9.3 assists. What a player.
Right.
I mean, he is a 6'4" guard. 6'4", 5 guard. But still, with all of this, on top of him having Kristaps Porzingis averaging 20 points and 9 rebounds a game, they have won 21 games.
Yeah, they're 21 and 19. Yeah.
Good Lord. How in the world are you a possible? And nobody's talking about him for MVP, by the way, but, I mean, he makes Joel Embiid look like a child with the numbers that he's putting up.
Yeah.
But nobody's talking about him. I mean, you think of the MVP conversation, you hear Embiid, you hear Jokic, you hear Harden, you hear LeBron. I haven't heard Luka Doncic in anybody's top 10.
And a lot of people, Logan, had Luka Doncic as like the front runner for MVP. There were a few analysts at ESPN who were saying it's going to be Luka Doncic who's going to be the front runner.
I mean, he has to be averaging almost 30, almost a walking triple-double.
But they're inconsistent though. Like that's the problem. I think you have to look at record. Look at Damian Lillard. Guy is, we just mentioned he puts up 50 like it's nothing. He's got the Blazers in a stacked Western Conference. He's got them at the 6th seed. Luka Doncic and the Mavericks, I would probably argue, are the most disappointing team thus far in the season. They're 2 games above 500. And, and it's not just Doncic. I feel like there's a lot of talent on this team. You've got guys like Josh Richardson, Porzingis, Tim Hardaway Jr. I really like Trey Burke and what he brings to the table. So, and they, they have a quality coach there in Dallas as well. But, I would also think, Logan, that record has to play a part of this as well. If you asked me today, would I give the MVP to Lillard or Luka? I would give the MVP to Luka. I would pick Lillard over the two. So what are your thoughts on the record aspect of how this plays out?
Oh, yeah, of course. I mean, from a political and social standpoint, and emotionally, you have to say that it does play a part. But, I mean, at the same time, I've heard plenty of people saying that James Harden should be the front runner, even though he's playing alongside 2 of the greatest basketball players in the NBA right now.
Yeah, I'm not...
So, I mean, yeah. For instance, you've got a guy, Harden, Durant, and Kyrie. If they go, say 60, they get 60 wins, and Harden's averaging a triple-double, but he's only getting, 20, 10, and 10, are you going to give it to him, or are you going to give it to a guy who's won 45 games, averaging 30, 15, and 15?
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's kind of give and take there. I 100% agree with you. It does have to play a factor, but, I mean, at this point, at this day and age, everybody's moving. You've got, 3 super teams in the NBA right now, and
right.
It's just...
Right.
It's really frustrating to play, but let me tell you, I'll argue with you all day about the most disappointing team in the NBA. I think my Celtics have to take that over.
Oh, yeah, can't forget about that, yeah.
They're not even 500, so I'll argue the Mavericks over the Celtics all day, every day. But, I mean, the inconsistencies are definitely an issue, but I still don't know how you could put anybody over Luka Doncic at this point in the NBA right this second, but... There's a lot to talk about, and hey, there's a lot of season left to play.
Yeah, it's certainly, yeah. So, yeah, certainly a lot of season left to play, Logan. As I mentioned, Cavs' schedule, we'll get that for you here real quick. So they lost to the Spurs last night. Upcoming schedule, Raptors and Cavs tomorrow from Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse at 7 p.m. Cavs will then have their last game in Cleveland at 7:30 p.m. on Monday against the Sacramento Kings. Then they'll head out for a 4-game road trip starting in Chicago. They'll be taking on the Bulls. They'll then head to the West Coast for 3 matches. They'll be playing the Lakers, the Kings, and then they'll be in Utah for a matchup with the Jazz. So that'll be the Cavs' upcoming schedule. And Logan, that concludes our NBA talk. But let's move into a couple minutes here for let's talk about NCAA men's basketball and talk about March Madness, because we've had a lot of stuff go on so far in March Madness. Logan, our first day was yesterday. I'm sure I saw people all around Nordonia High School streaming March Madness games in the hallways, even in classes. It's been such a long time, and I'm so happy to have March Madness back. Logan, let's start with who you possibly have winning this whole thing. So I'll ask you just up front, Logan, who is your front runner to win March Madness this year?
Oh, I hate to be the pick-all guy, but I mean, I can't see anybody beating Gonzaga. I know I've heard a lot of analysts talking about Gonzaga and how they didn't really play anybody. I saw somebody's bracket where they had Kansas beating Gonzaga, and I 100% agree that strength of schedule does matter, but I mean, and I've talked to everybody about this, even people who don't even understand college basketball, and I'm like, you don't have to understand it because you got to break it down like this.
Right.
All right? You have arguably the second best guard in the country in Jalen Suggs. You've got maybe the best shooter in the country in Corey Kispert. You've got the most fundamental power forward in college basketball by far with Drew Timme. And then you've got shooters and wings like guys by the likes of J.A.I., Andrew Nembhard, you name it. This team is just loaded.
Yeah.
I don't see anybody even running the tables with this team come national championship time.
Yeah. Let's talk about the Ohio State Buckeyes, Logan, who lost yesterday to the Oral Roberts Golden Eagles. So Ohio State 21-11, second seed, and they lose in overtime to a school that I've never even heard of, Oral Roberts. Your thoughts on this Ohio State loss, Logan? How did you feel about this one?
It was a mess to watch.
Yeah.
It was an absolute mess to watch. The top two scorers for Oral Roberts combined for 59 of their 75 points.
Yes.
What an absolute breakdown defensively. Absolute mess. And then, you look at Ohio State and you think of two names. Like, when you think of the Buckeyes, you're speaking of basketball, you think of two guys. You think of Dwayne Washington Jr.,
yeah,
the star guard.
Right.
And you think of E.J. Liddell, the big boy power forward,
yeah,
on the wing, right?
Right.
E.J. Liddell had an okay game. I mean, 10 of 15. Everybody's talking about how he choked. I don't really agree with that. I
14
think he hit
rebounds,
a couple big
though.
shots when it mattered.
Yeah.
He did not play the best defense come into the game. My man still had 23 points, shooting 10 of 15 from the field. I got to give him credit where it's due.
Yeah, and he also had 14 rebounds.
Exactly. 14 boards. I mean, Dwayne Washington, however, I understand 18 points, 10 rebounds for a guard that's really impressive, but I'm sorry, I cannot let this guy off the hook.
Yeah.
Anybody who watched the game, which I'm assuming a lot of people watched this game, because everybody watched every game. You're tied, I believe it was, or maybe they were down. I don't remember exactly what the score was, but, clock is winding down, and you choose to take a double step back with a hand in your face, and you choose to take that shot. I don't care if you're James Harden, if you're Kyrie Irving, if you're Kevin Durant, that's not a good shot.
Yeah.
Not to mention, you're in college. I believe this was when they were tied. This was when they were tied going into the end of regulation. He decided to take a step-back jumper to try to win it, when all he needed was a two.
Right.
I was absolutely astonished by this poor decision-making, and I cannot let him off the hook. I understand he's a kid, but,
right.
When you play with a D1 school, as a 2 seed in the tournament, you can't be taking shots like that. You cannot look to win games like that. You can't look to be the hero. You got to play team ball. Dwayne Washington didn't do that yesterday, and that's probably one of the biggest reasons why they lost.
Yeah, and we've had as I mentioned, Logan, ton of games so far. What were some other couple of matchups that surprised you? I'm looking at this scoreline. I see Wisconsin destroyed University of North Carolina 85-62 yesterday. So we've certainly had some wild results here. What are some of the other matchups that you've really been surprised of thus far, Logan?
Well, that was a big-time upset. But let me tell you, one of the biggest bracket busters of yesterday's games was North Texas and Purdue. The mean green North Texas team took out the Boilermakers of Purdue.
Mm-hmm.
What a show that game was. I mean, you're talking about Purdue being a 4 seed going into this game, playing a 13 seed in North Texas, and North Texas took it to them in overtime. 78-69 final.
Right.
I mean, what a show. Like I said, and this was the exact opposite of the Ohio State game. I mean, North Texas, their top 4 scorers, ready for this? 24, 16, 16, and 13.
Yeah.
What an absolute show of strength over a team that was so highly touted. I mean, I've heard of people that had Purdue going to the Elite Eight because of how electrifying they are defensively. And they just got manhandled in overtime. They could not even run with them. And it was just pretty pathetic to watch to me. But that's got to probably be the most surprising loss to me, even though, you talk about Oregon State and Tennessee. Oregon State took it to Tennessee.
Yeah.
Or, even you were saying, talking about Wisconsin, North Carolina.
Yeah.
I was not one that had with North Carolina going very far in this. They just don't really have the kind of high-octane offense that you think of blue blood schools.
Right.
But, I mean, what a day we had yesterday, and I'm excited to see what today holds.
Yeah, I'm super excited. Ohio University plays today. They're going to play against the Virginia Cavaliers, who are the defending NCAA champions, who won it a couple of years ago. So that'll be a fun matchup to watch as well. Some other matches that we have today, Drake will be going up against USC. We have Iona taking on Alabama. Missouri taking on Oklahoma, UCLA, and BYU. Gonzaga will debut in their March Madness tournament today. They'll be going up against Norfolk State today at 9:20 p.m. Super excited for for so many more of these NCAA games. Tomorrow, the second round will begin, Logan. We have Loyola, Illinois taking on Illinois. Wisconsin will be going up against Baylor, Syracuse, West Virginia. Just so many matches. We're certainly going to be having a very, very busy weekend. Logan, let's move now from the basketball world. Let's talk about some Cleveland Indians spring training for a little bit here. It's been a rough week for the Indians. They've lost their last 4 games in spring training. They gave up 17 runs this past Tuesday against the Angels. 17-8 was the final score in that game. The most recent win for the Indians was Monday when they defeated the Athletics 7-3. So as I mentioned, Indians have lost their last 4, Logan. They play the White Sox tonight at 4:05 Eastern Time. So, based on what you've seen this week from the Indians, how do you feel about, the upcoming season? Because, these 4 losses, these weren't pretty. They gave up 17 runs against the Angels, I mentioned. They gave up 12 against the Reds this past Wednesday. The close one against the Cubs, they only gave up 4 runs. But then they gave up 9 more runs to the Colorado Rockies last night. So, I mean, are you nervous about the start of the regular season for this Indians team, Logan? Or are you not? Or do you feel like this spring training, this is supposed to happen?
Well, I mean, I do 100% agree with that take that, it is spring training. There is this is, if you want to mess up, this is how you do it. Just like in practice, if you've ever, had coaches say, hey, if you're going to mess up or not know something, this is when you do it. You don't do that in the game because then you're getting pulled. It's just like that in spring training. This is your chance to make mistakes, figure it out, and gain experience, right? But just as I mentioned the last time we talked about the Indians, the inconsistent pitching is just killing them.
Yeah.
I mean, they have one of the best, in my opinion, one of the better pitching rotations in the MLB. But they have just been inconsistent to start this spring training so far. But probably even bigger than that as of the past week in particular is they cannot bat with runners in scoring position.
Yeah.
They just can't do it. I mean, you talked about the Cubs game and how they played pretty well from a pitching standpoint. I 100% agree. I was able to watch part of that game. But, come the bottom of the 9th, you're down 4-2, and they get 2 guys on immediately. Yeah. And then they get 3 straight outs. And I'm sitting here thinking, I'm like, you just had all the runs to win, and you didn't put more than 1 in.
Right.
How do you not execute that? It's like, think of that like in the NBA, missing a wide-open buzzer beater to win. It's the same idea. It's wide open.
Yeah.
All you had to do was hit a deep shot. That's it. And they could not put it in the air. They couldn't put it in play.
Right.
And to me, that is going to be one of the biggest aches of this Indians team come regular season. So if they don't figure out how to get a little bit more consistency out of the pitchers, and then figure out who they need as a cleanup guy, who's going to be able to consistently bat in the clutch, then they're going to have their own struggles coming up. Yeah,
upcoming schedule for the Indians. As I mentioned, they'll be going up against the Chicago White Sox tonight at 4:05 p.m. They'll then be going up against the Rangers tomorrow at 4:05. match up with the Brewers on Monday at 4:05 as well. And then Tuesday, they'll be going up against the San Francisco Giants. The 24th of March, which is this upcoming Wednesday, they'll be going up against the Arizona Diamondbacks. 9 p.m. is Eastern time is when that game will begin. Indians will have an off day on the 25th. So Logan and I will talk about all those games for you as well. We'll only a couple more weeks of spring training, Logan, and Indian season starts April 1st against the Detroit Tigers. It will be a road game for the Indians. And last but not least, Logan, let's dive into some NFL news here. First, we'll get started with the Cleveland Browns. I'm sure you've been talking about it this week with a lot of people at Nordonia, Logan. The Browns agreeing to terms with safety John Johnson III. And this is a big move for the Cleveland Browns. Last year, John Johnson finished with a total of 32 assisted tackles, 105 tackles. He also had 1 interception forced. So, this is a guy who can, Browns definitely, we've been talking about, need to step up their defensive game if they want to really, go on a deep playoff run. How do you think this signing of John Johnson, Logan, is going to impact the Browns going forward?
I think this is a tremendous pickup because alongside everything that you just talked about, this guy brings a mental attitude similar to what Baker Mayfield brought to Cleveland when he was drafted.
Right.
Similar to what Richard Sherman brought to the Legion of Doom back in the day. 5 years ago, that is. But, I think that this was a huge pickup, and they heavily needed it. But I think they are one or two pieces defensively short of having a solid enough defense to take them farther. I think, you think of the Browns, you got a solid front four. You've got Ogunjobi in there. You've got Billings. You've got Garrett. Yeah. And now you've got Karis McKinley, who was also signed recently.
Right.
That's a good front four. I'm happy with that front four. And then I think they badly need some linebacker depth. Badly.
Yeah.
B.J. Goodson, I do not believe has been re-signed yet. So they need to make that move soon. And but for John Johnson in particular, I think that this is a great move and will add a little bit of depth and a little bit of perception for this Brown secondary. And
also, Logan, I'm really excited to see what how John Johnson is going to work, along with Denzel Ward in that defensive unit. Let's also look at a couple of other moves that happened in the NFL this week. This is one that has had a lot of people talking. Andy Dalton to the Chicago Bears. If you're familiar with who Michael Wilbon is, he's a Chicago native. He was certainly not happy of this move. If you have a chance to check it out on YouTube, certainly recommend it. Very, very passionate about his Bears. But last year with the Cowboys, Logan, Andy Dalton completed about 65% of his passes. He threw for 2,170 yards, also threw for 14 touchdowns, but also had a total of threw for 8 interceptions as well. The Chicago Bears roster, Nick Foles is obviously still there. Not a lot of people have been very high on Mitchell Trubisky. If you think about it, the Bears, they drafted ahead for Mitchell Trubisky. They passed up on guys like Patrick Mahomes and Deshaun Watson. So in the quarterback position in Chicago, it's been a mess forever. Do you think Andy Dalton helps the Bears with this quarterback situation, or can we laugh even more about how bad the Chicago Bears have been at the quarterback position?
Well, I can't really tell you that it helps them because of the simple fact that he just is going to continue this rotation of Chicago the past, decade, if you will. Since, Jay Cutler was good for 2 or 3 years, and that was about the end of that. And ever since then, it has been Mitch Trubisky. Wait, but we got Nick Foles now. Let's bring in Nick Foles, but never mind. He sucks. We're going to put in Mitch Trubisky again. Oh, wait, Andy Dalton's free agent? Oh, let's go. I got to pick him up.
Yeah.
It's just going to be this constant rotation of 34, 35-year-old quarterbacks just going in and out of the Chicago rotation. And it's got to be the most frustrating thing for Chicago Bears fans to be watching the free agent pool and just sitting here thinking, wow, we have such a good defense. Too bad we can't even get a C-plus level quarterback to lead what actually appears appears to be a very solid offense. I mean, you've got guys like Allen Robinson in there who does qualify as a B plus A minus level receiver.
Yeah.
I mean, they cannot figure it out worth of anything. But Andy Dalton isn't going to make much of an impact. I don't see them winning more than 8 games next year. With him at the helm, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, they only won 8 games, finished with a record of 8-8 last year, did not make, or they did make the playoffs, lost to the Saints, Logan. So this is definitely going to be an interesting situation coming out of Chicago. Finally, one more topic of discussion point. Tyrod Taylor, Logan, is heading to Houston, Texas. The Texans sign Tyrod Taylor, and, obviously playing that quarterback position. Based on what happens with Deshaun Watson, do you think that this was a good move for the Texans to make by signing Tyrod Taylor?
It definitely depends. I mean, this could be a yes or no question, and I'll explain both sides of the argument. The yes answer to that is, well, if they make a move with Deshaun Watson and they don't get a quarterback in return. If they don't get a quarterback in return, but they get a boatload of picks, maybe a guy like Allen Robinson, a B-plus level, wide out, or an offensive lineman or a defensive player, then this is a great move for the Texans. It's kind of their safe bet if they make a fire sale with Deshaun Watson. The no opposing side of that is, let's say they make a move to what seems to be the more favorite. It is, the Miami Dolphins.
Yeah.
And assuming they get a guy, the number 3 pick in the draft, and Tua Tagovailoa tag along with him, what's the point?
Right.
Then you've basically got what you've got going in Chicago, a really solid young quarterback and a boatload of extra veterans.
Right.
Who want to play. So, to me, you're either going to turn it into Chicago, or maybe you've got yourself a C-plus level quarterback with a lot of offensive firepower to tag along with him. So it could go either way. I personally do like the sign for now, but they've got to make the right trades now.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out, how this whole Deshaun Watson situation plays out in Houston right now. We'll see what Tyrod Taylor can bring to the table. This has really been a very busy week so far in the NFL. Logan and I will break more of it down for you in our coming episodes. But for now, Logan, that actually concludes all of our material this week for the Cleveland Sports Show. So, once again, Logan, I really appreciate all of your analysis. You did a phenomenal job once again. You've really helped make the show a lot better, and you've really brought a great in-depth analysis to all of the topics we discussed, and I really appreciate you for that. Logan, I'll see you for our next episode. Until then, have a great weekend, and I'll talk to you soon.
All right, great. Thanks for having me.
Of course. And ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our episode of the Cleveland Sports Show. I just got off the phone with Logan. Now, let me talk about how you can access, before I leave here, but, wipe those tears because, I know you're sad that the episode's over, but I'll tell you how you can access more of my episodes of the Cleveland Sports Show. If you're on NordoniaHills.news, just make sure you go to the Contributors tab. You click on the Contributors tab, you'll see my name. It's about the second or third one down. It's spelled Darayyussethna, Darius Sethna. Once you click on my name, you'll be able to see all of my episodes to the Cleveland Sports Show. The more recent ones, all with Logan Purcell and his in-depth analysis as well. If you scroll down even more, you'll be able to see some of the articles I wrote over the summer. You'll also see the basketball game broadcasts of Nordonia varsity basketball, the play-by-play I did with multiple students who also work with NordoniaHills.news. You can also find all my work on Twitter as well. My Twitter handle is @NordoniaSports. And you can also type in my name in the Twitter search bar, Darayyussethna, and then you'll be able to find all of my work posted on Twitter as well. You can also check out the Cleveland Sports Show on the NordoniaHills.news YouTube page. I'm very happy to announce that if you're on YouTube and you want to listen to the Cleveland Sports Show, you can just go to the NordoniaHills.news YouTube page and then just find all the episodes that, the specific episodes you would like to watch. Also, very proud to announce that we've been going strong on Spotify for quite some time now. So if you haven't been on Spotify in a while, or whenever you are on Spotify, make sure you just type in my name, spelled DARAYUSSETHNA. Type that into the Spotify search bar, and you'll be able to access the podcast and all the episodes that go along with it. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes my latest episode of the Cleveland Sports Show. Thank you so much for joining me this week. Have a wonderful week. I'll see you for our next episode. We'll be talking about the Cavs. Logan and I will break down more Indians talk as their regular season is approaching. And we'll have so much NFL trade updates to discuss for you as well, hopefully. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes my latest episode of the Cleveland Sports Show. Thanks you so much. Special thanks once again to Logan Purcell for all of his wonderful work today and for all of his episodes. Take care, ladies and gentlemen. Have a wonderful weekend. Thanks.